Alright, let's talk about Fermi problems for a bit. What we're basically looking at here are sort of unanswerable questions, things where you can not really have a right answer. So, for example, how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? Unless you happen to be very keen on woodchuck physiology and habits and whatnot, I doubt that you're going to have much of a reasonable response to this. Unless you've got some, I mean, you could say a woodchuck would chuck all the wood if a woodchuck could chuck wood, I think, or something like that is the rote response. But anyway, point is, to get a number for it would be difficult. But if we wanted to get a number for it, we could try to think of some things. How long is the woodchuck chucking? That's an important question. If the thing's chucking forever, then it chucks an infinite amount of wood. Answer done, problem solved. If it's chucking for less than forever, now it matters. Is it chucking for a day, a week, a couple hours? How do we measure the wood? We measure it in cords, we measure it in trees. What's a reasonable amount of wood for a woodchuck to chuck? What does it mean to, chuck the wood? Are we just like picking up wood from one pile, tossing it to another pile? That takes some time. That could tell us how much wood a woodchuck could chuck if we knew how long a woodchuck could chuck for. And so if we had some numbers for this, we could start trying to put an estimate together. We get some ideas of it. Chucks for a day. It takes, 10 seconds to chuck a piece of wood from one pile to another. A day for a woodchuck is, 6 hours with a lunch and a siesta. So we get some picture of it. That's not really the best question in the world, though, because, we don't know much about woodchucks. At least I don't know much about woodchucks. So we're just kind of guessing. So let's look at another one. How many piano tuners are there in New York City, not the state? So how many people are making a living tuning pianos in New York? Well, clearly that's related to some extent to how many pianos there are in New York, and maybe that's related kind of to how many people are in New York. Now, if we knew how many pianos there were, maybe we need to answer the question, how often does a piano have to be tuned? So if I've got a piano and I want it to be functioning, do I need to tune it every month, every week, every year, never, ever in a million years? We kind of sort out that. And then, in terms of piano tuners, how long does it take to tune a piano? Or, alternatively, how many pianos can a tuner tune per day? Is this the kind of thing where tuners are just lining up and it's, piano done, piano done, piano done, take a break for a coffee, piano done, piano done? Or is this, taking a day, a couple days? Is this, some kind of artisanal piano tuning where they have to go and retreat into the woods and do it only in the all-natural means taught to them by their grandparents and their grandparents' grandparents? So let's think of this. How many people we got in New York? Let's start with about 1 million, let's say. It's probably not 100,000. It's probably not 10 million, at least I don't think so. We could look up a real number, but a real number is not important. A round number, a nice number, something that's in the ballpark is what we're gunning for. So about 1 million people. Let's say there's about 1 piano per family in New York. So what does that mean? That means that for the school that has, 100 pianos, because they're a piano school teaching pianology and such, they have a lot of pianos. For the person who does not have a piano, the bachelor who is living off of a suitcase or whatever, or the bachelorette who is probably also living out of a suitcase somewhere, the dozen, hundreds, millions of those get to kind of offset that. So we get the pianos as wallpaper, we get the pianos as a luxury that can be ill-afforded. Well, let's say about, on average, 1 per family. So that means maybe 1 piano per 5 or 6 people. I said, 6 people, that's kind of a messy number. Let's go 1 per 10 people. So that kind of rolls in some of this, people who have keyboards maybe, people who don't have pianos, things like that. So, if we've got 1 million people, and we've got 1 piano for every 10 of those, then we're looking at about 100,000 pianos in New York. So that's good. That's already we've got a number, something we can work with, something we can kind of think about and see if that makes sense to us. So we've got 100,000 pianos in New York. We got to ask ourselves, how often do these things have to be tuned? So let's say that we're tuning a piano, 2 tunings per piano per year. So we're going to tune it every 6 months. And again, this kind of swings between, the Philharmonic that's probably tuning it regularly, and the person who forgot that they owned a piano and it's just kind of in their basement and is, now a house for small animals. Never tunes it, presumably. So we got 100,000 pianos tuned twice a year, gets us 200,000 piano tunings per year that somehow have to be met by our fleet of piano tuners. Now let's say maybe one tuner can tune maybe 2 pianos per day. I don't know if that's reasonable. If you do know, please let me know. I know very little about piano tuning, it turns out. But let's say you could do one in the morning, you eat lunch, you do one in the afternoon. There's probably some transit involved, so maybe it's not always the case, but on average, maybe it works out like this. Let's say our piano tuner is working 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year, give them some vacation days, what have you. So it's about 250 working days a year for our piano tuner, which means that the piano tuner is getting 500 pianos tuned per year, and again, per tuner, right? 250 working days, 2 pianos per day, 500 pianos per year. Which means we get something like this. We've got 200,000 piano tunings that have to happen per year. That's what we're looking at here. Each tuner is able to do 500 piano tunings per year. So the tunings per year, it's kind of on the top and on the bottom. Those are going to cancel out. And so we have 200,000 piano tunings per year. One tuner is doing 500 per year, which would tell us that we need 400 piano tuners in New York. Bam. We got somehow from all of that a number, possibly reasonable, possibly totally made up and fictional, but the idea is that we can look and assess each of the steps that went into this and maybe get a little more data and maybe make a little better of an estimate and get to some idea of how many piano tuners. So now if we wanted to start a piano tuners union, maybe we know, how much to charge for admission if we want to be able to serve pizza. I don't know. One thing to note, complex fractions, and this is probably not actually a complex fraction, but it's been a long time since I took a math class. Fractions where you get fractions inside of fractions inside of fractions. Let me know if this is something that bugs you. Fractions are a real pain in the butt sometimes, but if we can talk about it and practice it a bit, life will be easier down the line. So, again, Fermi problems. The big idea. We take a weird, totally unanswerable question, such as how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood, or how many piano tuners are there in the great city of New York, and we try to work our way towards a numerical estimate, such as there being, apparently, by our best guess, 400 piano tuners in New York. Thank you very much, and have a good night, everybody. Or maybe now have a good night.